Welcome back to the Relationships Made Simple for Men podcast with me, Bryce Bauer. Today, I'm going to be talking about the most important communication tool that you can learn. This is something that I teach all my clients, and we continually practice this in the men's groups. It's really not that hard to understand, but it does take time to master. The acronym is VCR. If you grew up in the 90s or earlier, you probably remember VCRs. Those black book-shaped things that you had to push into the machine to watch videos, and then you actually had to wait for it to rewind its tape to get to the beginning. Anyways, that's one way to remember it, but it has nothing to do with the skill itself. So the V stands for validation. And whether you know it or not, we are always validating or invalidating what people say in every interaction that we have. Some of the ways that we may miss validating someone is to just go into our own story without acknowledging what they said, or any response that starts with the word but. The word but almost always means invalidation. Here's an example. You didn't follow through with what you said you were going to do. And if the response is, yeah, but I had a lot of stuff going on, even though you said yeah, the but cancels that out and it's an excuse for what you did or didn't do. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't use the word but ever. It's just something to pay more attention to. There are also facial gestures, eye rolling, sighing, folding your arms and looking away. These are little ways that we invalidate what someone's saying. And you know what I'm talking about if you've been on the other side of this. For some of you, it might feel like you never get validated. Anything you say is always met with resistance or dismissal or excuses. And over time, this can be crazy making. It can feel really frustrating to never feel like your partner cares what you have to say or is even working to understand you. So I just wanted to plant a flag as to what invalidation looks like so that you can better understand what validation looks and sounds like. The one phrase I would want you to drill into your head is that makes sense. That makes sense that you feel that way. That makes sense that you thought that. This simple phrase goes a long way. And if you want to expand on validation, you can practice connecting the dots. So it might sound something like, yes, it makes sense that you're frustrated because I said I was going to be home at this time and I was not, and I didn't communicate with you. That is validation. And it doesn't mean that we can't get into an explanation of something that happened, but the sequencing matters. If you start with invalidation and then you want to explain your side of things, your partner might feel really missed and they're not going to be as open to hearing your side, especially if you do this all the time. We also want to remember that we're validating through our body language and facial expression, keeping eye contact, relaxing our shoulders, softening our facial muscles. Not only does this help us appear less threatening, it also brings attention to our own nervous system. That's what I mean when I say this is an art. There are a lot of things happening all at once that you can be paying attention to, and you'll be amazed at how well this can work. Sometimes people are in a pretty activated state and you have to do this more than once, but it is possible to grow your capacity just to hear somebody. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. Some people think that's what validation is agreeing. It's not. It's simply confirming what they're seeing and feeling and thinking. So that's it. Remember, that makes sense. Now, the C stands for curiosity. And this one can be tough for some people because there are a lot of different directions it could go. But in simple terms, it's asking questions to deepen understanding. Now, this is something I'm really good at because I'm basically a professional question asker, and people pay me to ask them good questions so that they can frame things in a way that makes sense to them. But a lot of people don't know how to ask good questions. They only know how to talk about what's going on in their head, or they know how to ask, how was your day? Where did you go? What did you do? And those questions are fine. But if you want to help someone feel really understood emotionally, you need more questions in your bag. One question I like to introduce to people is, what's that like? Or what was that like? So if we're using the being late example, and you validate by saying that makes sense and here's why, a good follow-up question would be, what's that like when I say I'm going to do something and I don't follow through? This really gives your partner permission to explore and share with you what happens for them? It's a very open-ended question. And what I'd want you to focus on is just listening. The VCR does not have to happen in sequence. You'll be moving around throughout the process during a conversation. So if your partner says, it can be really frustrating because I thought we were going to go out to dinner, I found myself waiting on you and feeling concerned about what happened. Or if they say something that's a little bit harder to hear, like I start to lose trust in your word, all you have to do is listen and then go back to the validation. Yeah, that makes sense that you might lose some trust in my word when I say I'm going to do something and I don't communicate. Or that makes sense that you feel concerned because I know you really care about my safety. And the more that both you and your partner learn how to communicate better, the better this will go. Sometimes if you're trying something new, your partner doesn't know what to make of this new way of being, and they can feel confused, don't know exactly what you're trying to do. It can feel clunky or contrived, but I promise you, stay with it. This is the way to communicate better. If your partner is sharing about an experience they had that didn't involve you, you can adapt the what's that like question to different situations. If they say something to the effect of, my friend was complaining about their partner and they were just going on, telling me about all their problems. And I just started feeling annoyed. And you could say something like, that makes sense that you felt annoyed. What's it like for you when your friends complain about their partners? This can be so good to hear. This can help your partner feel really seen and cared about, and they can feel your interest in them. And you'll notice the better you get at this, the easier it's going to flow and the more fun it can be. Jenny and I have conversations like this all the time. If your partner's sharing what it's like for them when their friends complain about their partners, a light bulb may go off and you'll say, oh, isn't that something that your mom used to do to you about your dad? And they might say, yeah, I think that's why it really bugs me. And you're like, that makes sense. So you can see where this is going. You can turn any simple interaction into a deepening, connected, interesting conversation with curiosity. Curiosity is not just asking questions. It's also an energy that we hold. When we feel really resourced in ourselves, we have more space to take on someone else's experience and process it. Imagine what it's like for them, empathize, and then even collaborate intuitively to make connections. So this stuff is really, really cool. It's not just about resolving conflict, although this is helpful to have a framework to do this. It's also about making mundane interactions more supportive, more loving, and connecting. Okay, hopefully you guys got that and you're ready for the R. R stands for reflection. And I want to remind you that this isn't a three-step process. You're moving between these three skills. And reflection is more simple. You're basically taking what you heard your partner say and reflecting it back to them. This is the skill that I think people struggle the most with because it slows the conversation down. Sometimes when we are in a space of curiosity, we just want to go right to the question, but reflection helps create a shared understanding. And it can also help your partner see themselves more clearly because sometimes we say things that aren't completely accurate to our experience or what happened. And when we hear it reflected back, that can change the way that we understand it. So for instance, if your partner says, I felt annoyed that my partner was complaining about their husband, and you say, that makes sense that you felt annoyed when your friend was complaining about their partner. And your partner may say, well, yeah, I was annoyed, but I think I was really more sad. So you can see how that works. On the surface, they felt annoyed, but when they heard it reflected back, they noticed that they felt sad. And that may not have happened if you didn't reflect and slow it down a bit and examine it. Because people do tend to want to share a lot of story really quickly, and it's common for them to miss some of the important pieces or the deeper feelings about the experience. And so reflection helps with that. If you've ever worked with Jenny and I, you know that we do a lot of this, and it's amazing to see people relax when they feel like someone really gets them. And clients often come to some of their own conclusions just by having what they're saying reflected back to them. Of course, we want to introduce our own perspectives and advice to clients, but VCR does a good part of the job. One of the objections I get to reflection is that people feel like it's contrived or unnatural. And I think that's because they're just not used to it or their partner's not used to it. But as you learn to talk this way more consciously, more present centered, the easier it gets. You kind of know when to do what intuitively. When Jenny and I have a moment where we're not understanding each other, often what I'll do is I'll say, hey, how about I just work on understanding you? I'll just do some reflection and validation. How does that sound? And that really works for Jenny. And it's a reality that sometimes we have to take turns with this. If there's activation, emotions are elevated, but this is the best way I know how to do this. You also don't have to reflect back exactly what you heard. You can put it into your own words, and your partner can correct you if they think that you didn't get it right. But to be safe, I'd usually want to use their exact words until you kind of build up a trust that you both are trying to understand. It is very interesting watching heterosexual couples try to do this because I see how naturally women can do this. They're more naturally attuned for the most part, and how quickly men want to go into fixing and kind of struggle to slow down and actually use the tools. So if you're trying this with your partner, feel free to throw my name into the mix and say, hey, I listened to this guy and he said do this, and this is what I'm going to try to do. Sometimes it helps to have some context. But even if you just start doing this today, I think the success rate of your partner feeling more understood, more connected, you being more present in the conversation is very, very high. So don't forget this acronym: BCR. Validation, curiosity, and reflection. If you need more help with this, feel free to reach out to me for support. Like, follow, share, comment if you like what I have to say. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll be back next week with another episode. Peace.